Um, I'm really grateful to you for being here this morning to support Laura. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jillian Martin, and I'm a member of the Southern California Bluebird Club, and I'm also the director of the Cavity Conservation Initiative. And I'll take a moment or two in a little bit to explain who we are and what we do. But I'm speaking to you from my home office here in Laguna Niguel. And I hope wherever you are and whatever the challenges that you are facing right now in this very difficult time, that you will experience our time together this morning as a sort of a joyful escape. And I hope that you will take that joy with you through the rest of the day and share it with others. Before we actually have Laura speak, I wanted to go over some virtual business, if you understand what I mean. I'm going to ask you please to keep yourself on mute until Laura has completed her presentation. That will make it a positive experience for other attendees so that we can shut out any background noise or anything that would interfere with our ability to hear. Now, I know many of you know Laura and have contributed to her success so far. And so I'm going to ask you to use the chat if you would like to tell us a little bit about who you're associated with, what group you belong to, and maybe just a word about how you got to know Laura. We'd like to know who's here, and we'd like to meet you and have an opportunity to chat with you at the end if you're willing to hang on there. Let's see. So we all know this year has been a tough year for everyone, but in case you don't know, the obstacles posed by COVID-19 have not gotten in Laura's way. This has been a pivotal year for her, and many of you have continued to support her in many ways and have helped her to really get clear on what her goals are and her priorities are. And so it's been an exciting year for her, and I've been privileged to be along for the ride. But I am sure that those of you who know Laura will join me in saying that we also want to acknowledge Laura's mom and dad, because they have been the bedrock of her life. It is no accident that Laura is who she is, and that she has the character and values and decency that we all want to see in each other. They have been the most, as far as I can see, the most remarkable, devoted parents. And I feel privileged, as I'm sure many of you are, that they have allowed us to share so much of Laura's life and to work so closely with us. It really has been a privilege. And in these times when all of us yearn for hope wherever we can find it, don't we all agree that Laura is a lighthouse of hope? So I'm going to join my hands together and bow to Mr. and Mrs. Tseng for putting this lovely daughter into the world and allowing us to share her life. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Bluebird Club, the Southern California Bluebird Club is a nonprofit. It is an affiliate, one of many affiliates of the North American Bluebird Society. And the mission we all share is that we protect and support cavity nesting birds. We do that by building boxes, specifically for species. We place them in suitable habitats, and we monitor them every week, usually during the nesting season. It takes a network of volunteers across the country to make this work possible. And I just want to use this opportunity to say that we are always in need of new monitors, because monitors do retire or for some reason move away or whatever. And we have many available nest box trails that are begging for new monitors. So in the chat, you will see our website link there, and you will see the contact information for reaching us, or you can contact me. But Bill Wallace, our president, would be happy to hear from you. We welcome, help us spread the word, please, that we need monitors, and that the only way we can continue our work is to have more monitors. replacing those that retire. So the North American Bluebird Society sort of is the umbrella organization. They keep all the different Bluebird societies across the country connected. They keep us updated on the topics that are important for our work. And they actually even have a scholarship fund for people doing research or work to benefit cavity nesters. So we encourage you, if you're so inclined and interested in cavity nesting birds, to become a member of the North American Bluebird Society. I assure you that their quarterly magazine called Bluebird is well worth the price of membership. And membership is really not very expensive. So the other thing I want to explain, that to put a little word in about the Cavity Conservation Initiative in the event that you are not familiar with it. I think of the Cavity Conservation Initiative as a sister program of the Southern California Bluebird Club. Our mission focuses on the promotion and advocacy for dead and dying trees as habitat for wildlife. And I'm not just talking about, cavity nesting birds. The habitat value of dead trees is really poorly understood and recognized. And as many of you know, dead trees are steadily removed across our landscape, and those actions are impacting many cavity nesting birds, particularly songbirds, that need small cavities that are excavated, either formed naturally in trees or that are excavated by woodpeckers. So I cannot emphasize enough that we need, while we're providing nest boxes, which are critical to cavity nesting birds, particularly songbirds, which are secondary cavity nesters, we need to promote the safe retention of dead trees because their ecological significance is great. The last thing I want to share is that the Cavity Conservation Initiative, in order to promote its mission to retain dead trees, formed a partnership with the tree care industry in the West. Because as you all know, tree care providers and arborists are doing tree risk assessments and are making recommendations about the removal of trees or how safe trees are to remain, dead trees are to remain in place. So we formed this partnership in the state of California initially, grassroots effort. We got many stakeholders together to try and not only promote the safe retention of dead trees, but also to set up guidance to reduce impact on nesting birds during the nesting season. We have established best management practices, and having accomplished that, we have been adopted by or folded into the Western chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. So we are now a part of that industry in the West. And I'm here to tell you that we have made great strides. And if I had time, I will tell you all the things that we have to brag about, but you can go to treecareforbirds.com and you can see the resources that we have to offer and the many things that we have accomplished so far. So that kind of gives you a context about, the work that we do and how Lara has fit into our work. So I'm going to turn it over now to Bill Wallace, our president, who will talk a little bit about our Founders Scholarship Fund, which supports people who in our region who want to do work for cavity nesting birds. And of course, Lara was a recipient, our very first recipient of the Founders Scholarship Fund. And we are very honored that we have the opportunity to support her work. So Bill, I'll turn things over to Bill now, and he'll tell you a little bit about the Founders Fund.
Yes, I thank everyone for coming today. I've been following Lara over the last few years as she's graduated into just one fabulous young lady. I'm so impressed by her. Our Founders Fund was set up less than a year ago, I guess, after the passing of one of our founders of the Southern California Bluebird Club, that was Sully Rayon. We decided to set this up as a way of being able to support individuals that are looking into any case. We gave the first award to Lara to do an experiment on the intake of eggshells by bluebirds during the nesting season. Prior to that, we have had 4 master's students from Cal State Fullerton that we have worked with through Dr. Hosey there on different projects for their master's thesis. And the Founders Fund sort of, came out of that because we've been, whenever we've had a student, we've given a donation to the biology department there. Lara became a volunteer with the CCI outreach when she was 11 and became a nest box monitor when she turned 12, which she's just done some fabulous things. I'm just, again, so very proud of her. We do need new monitors. Somebody had asked about the Burbank, Pasadena area. We don't really have any contacts from the club up in that specific area. We do have people that are down in the Lakewood, Long Beach area and Chino and such. But if you went to the NAB's website or what's the other one? Our
SoCalBluebirds.org.
Yeah, SoCalBluebirds.org, which is
our new website.
Yeah, the new website. There are resources there that can help you, find something. Mainly what we have need for right now are just in the Orange County area, both in the North County and South County. So if you have an interest, you can go to our website or to our email address and send me an email, and I'll get you in contact with an area monitor to see if there's something that you would enjoy doing. Typically what we do is during the nesting season, which is March through the end of July, we will go out to our trail, take the box down, check it, see what the progress is in nesting, make notations of that progress, and eventually we send that at the end of the year back to the state organization. And from there, sometimes some of that data does end up at Cornell University, the Department of Anthropology, which keeps a master database of native birds in the US. So again, I thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy Lara's presentation. And I'll hand it back over to Jillian. Thank you.
Okay, so it's time to turn things over to Lara. So Lara, honey, I think you have the ability to screen share, so please feel free to pull up your presentation.
Hi, I'm Lara. Thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to listen to my presentation. For those of you that don't know me very well, I am a 13-year-old birder from Southern California. Today, I would like to talk to you about my Bluebird eggshell project, which researched the timing of eggshell consumption in different reproductive stages and broods of the western bluebird. I'll be going over why I chose to do this project, introducing calcium and its importance to birds, going over the different aspects of my project, talking about questions that were sparked by this project, and things I learned There are many reasons why I chose to do this project. The first one is that research is important for both knowledge's sake and for conservation. By doing literature reviews and reading about other studies, I could build upon the research of others. I have the support of the Southern California Bluebird Club. I would not have been able to do this project without their funding and volunteers to collect data for me. I also wanted to expand on my previous 2 eggshell projects, which were to see if birds would even eat eggshells and in what season they would mainly eat eggshells. I wanted to explore an alternative food source for birds. Since I saw waterfowl and other birds being fed junk food, I later realized eggshells probably aren't the solution to this, but it was a major inspiration at the beginning of the project. It's a well-known fact that calcium is important for breeding success. Calcium supplementation can increase eggshell thickness, egg volume, and can result in an earlier start of breeding. Insufficient calcium can cause eggshell abnormalities, smaller clutch sizes, and can make for a later start of breeding. External sources of calcium are important to birds, especially songbirds, since they do not arrow.
Laura?
Additionally, insects only provide 5 to 10% of the calcium needed for egg laying, so this means bluebirds will need to find other sources of calcium. Martin?
Yes, there's a little delay, honey, with your slide and your voice. So, but go ahead. It is moving. I just wanted you to be aware of that. I have a feeling Laura's going to try and reboot her presentation. Looks like that must be what she's.
Sorry, I think my internet blipped out for a second.
Yeah, there you go. You're back, honey.
I'm going to share my screen again and continue on.
Good. Good job.
So I'll pick up where I left off. So insects provide only 5 to 10% of the calcium needed for egg laying. So this means that the bluebirds need to find other sources of calcium. And calcium isn't just important for egg laying, it's also important for a nestling's skeletal growth. Calcium can come from many sources. For example, animal bones, snail shells, calcium-rich soil, and even a bird's own eggshells. The top 2 photos show a roadrunner cracking open a snail shell and eating the inside. By doing this over and over, it has left many snail shells at the base of this rock. I wondered if this was a source of calcium for songbirds during the breeding season. And it's not just birds that need calcium. Other animals need it as well. Take this ground squirrel, for example. There were 2 main questions I wanted to answer with my project. The first is in which reproductive stage eggshell consumption would be greatest. I hypothesized that this would be in nest building and egg laying. I also want to know in which brood consumption would be greatest. I hypothesized that this would be in the first brood, since on average, bluebirds have 1 more egg in the first brood compared to the second. My 12 volunteers and I did weekly checks on the amount of eggshell consumption, and the reproductive stage of the nest inside of the nest box. Calcium was provided to birds using a small container with a dime-sized hole on top. It was attached to the box using Velcro. This container was filled with 5 grams of eggshells. I did not expect the birds to consume this much eggshell. This was just so that there was surplus. This data was collected on 64 nest boxes. This graph shows the total amount of eggshell consumption and the different reproductive stages. I grouped the reproductive stages into 3 groups: nest building, egg-laying and incubation, and nestling and fledgling. I saw the greatest consumption in nest building, egg-laying, and incubation. This graph shows the consumption grouped into minimal, low, medium, and high consumption. It also shows the different stages. In brood 1, greatest consumption was seen in nest building and egg laying. In brood 2, greatest consumption was seen in egg laying and incubation. The second brood was on average greater by 0.1 gram, although this was not statistically significant. Some possible impacts on my results is that there were fewer second broods than first broods, and this may have been caused by the rainstorms and heat during the season. This graph shows the average consumption per week in grams and the different nests. As you can see, there is a high variation between nests. Before I continue on with the discussion, I want to mention that the statistical analyses supported these results. I won't go into the statistical analyses in detail today, however, since that would be a presentation all of its own. My first hypothesis was supported in that greatest consumption was seen in nest building, egg laying, and incubation. My second hypothesis was not supported in that clutch sizes were similar and timing between broods was short. There are 3 main conclusions I drew from these results. The first is that consumption in nest building, egg laying, and incubation was in preparation and for replenishment from egg laying. My second is that brood number had little effect on the amount of consumption. My third point isn't related to the main question I asked. However, I found this very intriguing. Birds were very individualized in where and when they took their calcium. This suggests that they have different strategies for obtaining calcium and reproductive success. These are the works cited for my presentation. I have many more that I read through in the literature reviews. Many questions were sparked by doing this project. My first is, are nestlings being fed crushed eggshells by the parents? I asked this question because there's low amounts of consumption in nestling and fledgling stages. And since calcium is important for a nestling's skeletal growth, I wondered if the nestlings might have been the ones to consume the calcium. I also wanted to know if there were sources of calcium that are more beneficial to reproductive success than others. There are studies showing that finding calcium is costly for birds in terms of energy. So I wondered, why wouldn't they take my eggshells, which were easily accessible as they were on top of the box, and choose instead to forage for other sources? I also wondered if females who laid a second brood consume more eggshells in the nestling and fledgling stages of the first brood. This was because they prepared for egg laying in the nest building stages. So I thought, why not earlier? There are many things I learned from doing this project. The first is that literature reviews and citations are very important to know what has been done before and what you can build upon. They might be tedious at times, but they were very important to my project. Organizing, planning, and good communication was very important to my project. COVID-19 presented an extra challenge with this. I learned to objectively critique every aspect of my project. I couldn't just keep something because I liked it. I had to have a good reason for it. I learned to state assumptions as just assumptions and not as fact. It's important to distinguish these two things. I learned to write clearly and concisely, especially with protocols, so that they are simpler and easier to follow. Before starting this project, I knew that songbird breeding biology was extremely complex due to my background knowledge of birds and the literature reviews I did. However, without doing this project, I would have never have realized how complex it truly was. Here are some more general lessons I learned from doing this project. The first is that problems present the opportunity to improve and increase understanding. The second is that if one aspect of my project isn't working out, it doesn't mean the whole project has failed. The third skill I learned is to present content in a way that is relevant to my audience. I can't just say anything I want and expect my audience to be interested and engaged. Now that I've told you all about my research, I want to share with you another cause that is near and dear to my heart: conservation of the western bluebird and the Southern California Bluebird Club. The efforts of these nest box monitors do more than just support individual bluebird pairs in the spring. They have a significant impact on the species population overall. To many people, birds are just a type of animal that fly and flitter in the background. Birders, however, find them a delight to watch, listen, and to identify. Even so, birders tend to think of birds as just a species, not so much as individuals. But through my recent experience, I've come to realize that western bluebirds and all species are made up of individuals. Each data sheet tells the story of a pair of bluebirds and the chicks they raise. The successes and failures of each nest is a story of many unobserved strategies each pair use in their struggle to survive and reproduce. While there is minimal contact between birds and monitors, their stories are nevertheless intertwined. Each monitor has his or her own story about why they chose to devote their time and resources to help with bluebird conservation. And they have stories of how monitoring and observing birds has impacted their lives. For them, birds are no longer something fluttering in the background. Birds have altered their perceptions of the natural world. And now, through their collective efforts, western bluebirds currently have a conservation status of least concern. Conservation isn't just for bluebird monitors and ornithologists going out into the rainforest and saving endangered species. It's the responsibility of each and every one of us. We don't need to make conservation a huge portion of our lives. We can make a difference with simple actions. For example, we can talk to others about conservation issues. We can point a bird out to a person passing by and share something interesting about it. We can buy bird-friendly coffee and reduce consumption. And by keeping cats indoors, we can save the lives of billions of birds each year. Collectively, we can make a huge difference. I want to extend a huge thank you to all my volunteers. These were Cappy Hurst, Stephanie Tanton, Mary McClear, Jim Semaroth, Danette Davis, Dr. Tim Bradley, Amanda Gaskin, Susan Bulger, Danette Davis, Amy Kearns, and Gary Livesey. I would not have been able to monitor 64 boxes best as I tried. Thank you to the Southern California Bluebird Club and the Cavity Conservation Initiative for providing me funding and volunteer support so that I could do this project. I also want to thank Mr. Bill Wallace, who gave me this opportunity to present my project to you today. Thank you to Ms. Martin, who has been my longtime mentor. Not only has she been a great help with my project in supporting me and organizing it, she has also provided me many other opportunities and connected me with many other mentors who have been crucial for me to become who I am today. She has provided much support in everything I do. She has been a great inspiration and mentor. I also want to thank Dr. Bradley for providing invaluable feedback during the beginning and making me consider parts of my project that I hadn't before. He also provided me resources for the statistical analyses. Dr. Bradley was a great inspiration for me and an example of what a scientist and a scholar look like. His support and encouragement meant a lot to me as I struggled through different aspects of my project. I want to thank Dr. McHenry and Miss Ashley Peterson. Miss Ashley helped me with the statistical analyses and put a lot of effort and time into it. I especially want to thank her for her patience in answering all my questions and explaining the statistical analyses to me. As you imagine, I'm a complete novice to this subject. I want to thank all the mentors and inspirations who have brought me to who I am today. I don't have time to thank each and every one of them, but they have been a huge influence on me and supported me throughout this entire project. I want to give a thank you to CNC Audubon, LA Birders, and Western Field Ornithologists, as well as my fellow student birders at LA Birders students and WFO students. I want to thank my mom and dad for putting up with me through my bird obsessions and with my project. I also want to thank my friend Marie, who has been a great support to me, and I also want to give a big thank you to the birds, of course, because of course I would not have been able to do this project without them. I'd be happy to take any questions and receive any comments that you might have about my presentation. Before I do so though, I want to show you this picture. This is the first time I saw an ostrich egg. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Oh, Laura, our hearts are full. I'm sure I speak for everyone. So anyone who would like to speak with Laura, please unmute yourself and say a word or ask a question or add anything you'd like.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so proud of you. You did so well. That was awesome. Okay. I was actually wondering because I remember you complaining about some part of the machine not doing its job. I was wondering what part of the presentation that was about because you never did answer my question.
Sorry about that. So I had struggled a bit with the statistical analyses portion at the beginning since I was using a program that wasn't suited for my data because my data was abnormal, as you might expect from nature because the birds will do whatever they want. But I asked Dr. Bradley for help, and he referred me to Miss Ashley Peterson, and she was really helpful in explaining the statistical analyses to me, and she put a lot of time and effort to it.
Thank you.
So any other questions or comments?
I'd like to say that that was an excellent presentation and a very interesting study, Lara. I really admire what you did, and I think it was very interesting and well presented.
Thank
One
you.
of the things that we find when we're doing biological studies is that as soon as you introduce the behavior of the animals, the variability in the data increases enormously. So that's one of the things that you observed, is that some of the pairs would eat a lot of the shells and others didn't. And it's very hard to know why that is. It's really more of a function of behavior than it is the physiological needs of the animal. And so that's a fascinating part of biology, is the behavior of animals. And we see a lot of variability in that, as did you.
Yeah, and I really love studying birds and reading about studies on birds and on biology in general, because there's so much variability and there are so many surprises in it.
It's
Thank
true.
you, Dr. Bradley.
Very, very nice job.
I had a question. Am I coming through?
Yes, John, go right ahead.
Hey, good job, Laura. Thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. I posted a question on chat about, I wonder if there are parallel studies, what you've done on the other two species on mountain, and especially the very well-studied eastern bluebird that seemingly has been studied in minute detail for many, many decades. And I just comment also that all three bluebirds are very early spring migrants, although western is resident. So they start nesting early, and they're late fall migrants. So there's time to have two, perhaps even, I don't know if they triple brood at times.
Yeah.
How that would affect the eggshell consumption of eggshells. But eastern bluebird, seems like there must be something out on that might parallel what you've studied.
Laura, do you want to tell John about the study from Cornell?
Yes.
It did mention eastern bluebird.
So there was a study from Cornell, and it was initially why, kind of like the start to my interest in, well, I did 2 years of projects prior, but I really wanted to delve into the subject with this project, and I was really inspired by that study, which had a lot of citizen scientists put out calcium for the birds, and they were looking at the frequency of where the birds came on the ground, putting the calcium on the ground and on a platform, and it mentioned eastern bluebirds. So that's where I understood that bluebirds would eat eggshells, and that if I did this project, they probably, at least some of them, will probably eat eggshells. I mostly did literature reviews and citations on other western bluebird studies and other studies on other birds that were more closely related to my subject.
Thank you.
Good morning, Laura. Way to go.
Hi, Laura.
Are the snails eaten by the roadrunners, any specific species? And if you need them identified, I can certainly help.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure what species they are, so I would definitely value your input on that.
So Sandrine Bijois-Schersten, the wonderful nature photography in our Orange County region, is the one who shared those photos, and she knows exactly where that rock is that they just about use. So she could probably guide you to that rock, or take a picture of the shells that might help you identify,
It may not have anything to do with it, but if you want to know, I work for the malacology department at the Natural History Museum, which is
Oh,
study of mollusks. And my
Oh.
wife used to do the echinoderms. One more question. We have never seen bluebirds here in Burbank. Maybe that's why you don't have any nest boxes here.
That's very, very possible. We did have at one point a gentleman that was in Pasadena that was working with us, but he sort of dropped from sight, and I'm not sure what happened there. But I know we have birds in Lakewood and North Long Beach, that area, and so the main thing would be to look for bluebirds in areas where there's a lot of green grass. That's why we typically put our boxes in parks, cemeteries, golf courses, because they feed on insects on the ground, as opposed to a black phoebe, which will take them on the air, or a tree swallow. So.
Cool, thank you.
Your phoebes don't do anything.
okay. So it's 11:13.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry. Laura, amazing presentation, but I thought of a couple people who would love to have watched. Is there a way that this was recorded, or that somebody else can watch the presentation later?
Yes, I'm recording I have recorded the presentation, and I'll edit it and stuff like that, and I'll have the recording ready sometime. So
We will
Wonderful.
also put the recording up on the website of the Southern California Bluebird Club. So that's socalbluebirds.org. We'll have it up there, when it's ready, when it's been edited.
Wonderful.
I do have a question for you, Laura. I was wondering, with the calcium, you mentioned that you used eggshells. Did you crush them in any particular manner, or have they done studies using calcium as a powder, in a powder form, maybe, dipped mealworms in them and seeing if they would be consuming more mealworms that had the calcium on them, or the ones without calcium? Do you know of any studies like that?
I don't know of any, but I would be interested in searching about that. For me, my eggshells were crushed into about like half your pinky nail, probably, with just a spoon. And of course, I washed out and sterilized the eggshells first by baking them or microwaving them. Yeah.
And was this a standard procedure that other studies show that they use that same procedure and that same size of eggshells, and always a chicken eggshell?
I saw different forms of calcium being used. So there were other studies using eggshells. There was also studies using oyster shell as well as snail shell. And I'm sure there's other forms of calcium other studies have used as well.
Thank you.
I think Jake had a question. How do you make sure that the missing calcium was consumed by the bluebirds and like not a squirrel, or blown away or anything?
I can't be sure of that, but the opening is pretty small. It's a dime-sized hole, so I'm not sure if a squirrel could get to it, but I mean that's always possible. For wind, basically what I did was I had a cap that was like depressed so that it, even if wind blew through, it wouldn't like fly out, basically. And I also put like little pinholes at the bottom of the container so that any rain that came through wouldn't just like overflow the container.
Laura, I just had one thought on that same issue. If you really wanted to make sure, you could put up one of those wildlife cameras near a couple of one or more nests, one more little thing to monitor. But that would be kind of a fun thing.
Yes, sure would.
The other thing that I noticed in gathering some of the data that Lara was using is that in many cases, none of the eggshell was missing, even over a long period of time. And so that suggests that things like wind or evaporation of, off of water during dry air or something like that didn't have any effect. What you can't be absolutely certain of is that it was always a bluebird that ate the shell. But of course, the fact that it was on the nest box and that the bluebirds were on that box and looking at it really suggested that that's where the shells were going. But anyway, there really was very little evidence that eggshell was lost to any other, wind or weather or whatever, because if a cage was not, a bluebird box was not occupied, it would stay right at 5 grams for several weeks. So I think that I think you're quite safe in assuming that it didn't blow out or evaporate or whatever.
Yeah, I saw that in my boxes that didn't consume for like the first half of the season. And I had considered the wind and the rain and the elements when I was designing the container, because I knew that if those things affected the consumption, since they consume such like relatively small amounts, I knew that I had to control those things. Thank you, Dr. Bradley.
So I had a quick question. You provided eggshells. What do bluebirds do if there's not a Laura and volunteers to provide eggshells? Do they go around looking at other bird nests for discarded remnants of eggs? And then do all birds need eggshells to some degree? Is this part of something I'm missing in my life of watching bird nesting, or just sort of spread the question out more broadly? Bluebirds without Laura.
Yeah, they definitely have natural sources, because I mean they wouldn't be laying eggs without the natural sources. Those natural sources would be like snail shells they find and animal bones, as well as their own eggshells. Like they will kind of recycle that sort of. I don't know if bluebirds will go to other nests and look for eggshells, because finding a nest is pretty hard, and if it's another bluebird pair, they're aggressive to each other.
Yeah.
I think I can comment on that too, and that is that for birds that are laying eggs, they also will mobilize the calcium from their own bones. So as in all of the vertebrates, your bones are the major store of calcium in your body. And so when the females are going through the production of eggs, they will lose calcium from their bones. And that can be a real strain for some females if they're doing a lot of egg laying. But what that means is that the calcium that they eat for the entire year can be stored away in their bones. So they can actually build up their calcium stores all through the year and then use them up to a large extent during the oviposition period. And the birds that have been studied the most, of course, are chickens. And because they're laying so many eggs, they're actually a tropical species that will lay eggs almost through the year. They definitely need additional stores of or additional sources of calcium in their diet. And that's the reason that they're given oyster shells or eggshells or other sources of calcium commercially, because otherwise they would completely deplete their calcium stores.
How does the ingestion of salt, salt licks are so important, at least for animals, but including big mammals. Does the ingestion of salt affect any of the sorts of things, overall good health, having anything to do with eggs? Or salt's a totally unrelated aspect that's also important?
Do you want Lara to answer that, or you want me to answer? This is meant. Well, let's just say that the salt is really important in terms of producing body fluids like blood and extracellular fluid. So the sodium and chloride would be very important for that. The calcium would be more important for bones and eggshells. But other, so all of our cells use calcium, but those are the major stores of calcium.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get back to let Lara answer the questions.
Thank you for your input, Dr. Bradley. I really appreciate it.
Well, it looks like that might be it. If anyone has any concluding remarks or comments, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, we'll say thank you so much to you all for being here for Lara today and for your very interesting questions and comments and input. And you're a gift to us to be here. So thank you so much.
Yes, and I too would like to thank everybody for coming and taking part in this. It's been really very, very interesting. And again, if you have any questions about what we're doing or how we go about doing what we do, please send me an email to our new email address, and do my best to answer your questions, or if I can, to get with one of our other monitors and see what I can provide. So again, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Bill, that email address, it's in the chat. SoCal Bluebird Club 38@gmail.com.
Yeah, and you can also find that from our website. So if you just, you can Google SCBC or SoCal Bluebirds, and the website will come up pretty easily. So if you can't remember.
Terrific.
Thank
Okay,
you for everyone
have
who attended.
a
And thank you,
wonderful
Dr.
day.
Bradley.
Lara, congratulations, honey. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Laura. Great presentation. Bye.
Thanks for coming, Lily.